G'day everyone, welcome to another episode of the Purple Coloured Glasses. In this episode I'll be going through my tips for round 15, how I fared in this top of the table clashes all around, and how Freo went against Carlton in an absolutely diabolical performance. So first up, Melbourne against Brisbane, and I thought I was onto a winner here when I tipped Brisbane, and unfortunately in that first quarter they just missed so many chances. And then the slumbering beast that's been Melbourne over the last couple of weeks awoke and absolutely smoked Brisbane. If they kicked straight, this could have almost been a 100-point margin. So Brisbane were lucky to get away with a 60-point loss here. Thought Zorko and Bailey out ended up being quite significant. McCluggage got a bit of the ball, but outside of that, Lockie Neal had harms move on to him, and he just really couldn't get a touch after that. So Melbourne look like they're back, which could be a scary proposition for anyone that's got to play them on the way home. Bulldogs against Hawks. Doggies were on the back foot early. Hawks got a bit of a lead in that first quarter, leading at quarter time, and then the Dogs really just seemed to assert dominance over the game, reduced that margin, got ahead, and then just put a fairly big gap on Hawthorn, and that was the sort of expected result, I'd say, for this game. West Coast against Essendon. West Coast really won this through their really effective kicking in front of goal, particularly early on in the game. Essendon were dominating the field position, had a lot of entries, but they just didn't make it count on the scoreboard, and that ultimately cost them. Josh Kennedy kicked 5 goals straight, and Peter Wright kicked 4 goals 4. That's pretty much the game right there. So yeah, ended up getting that one based on never tip Essendon to win 2 games in a row theory. But you know, West Coast, they start to get up and about with a bit of confidence. You never know what happens for the rest of the year. I think they will win a couple more, particularly at home. And then the unfortunate game of the round, Fremantle against Carlton at Marvel Stadium. Carlton got up for their grand final against Fremantle. I was surprised they didn't beat us earlier in the year. They've won 5 out of the last 6 against us. And I'm always on about certain players, it seems, from Carlton dominating when they play us. And it wasn't as pronounced as guys like Jack Nunes and Newman dominating. But you do look at the stat sheet and you see Matthew Kennedy, who's actually had a good year this year, season best game. Tom De Koning, young ruckman playing against Sean Darcy, career best game. Lewis Young, ranked in the top 10 players, playing as an undersized key position defender against Matthew Tabner and Rory Lobb. So, it's just the same old story against Carlton. Their midfield just absolutely obliterated us, and we just can't get our hands on it. And it's just frustrating, I must say. I'm not sure if the boys just went away for their bye break and just didn't come back, switched on, started flat, but so many blokes just couldn't get a hold of it. I'll start with the back line. I thought they all played quite well, reasonably well. They kept the margin at 81 points from 64 inside 50s. Like, it could have been an absolute blowout. Alex Pearce probably played his best game. I thought Logue was quite solid on Kerno. We got a couple, I think, later in the game when, you know, it's just the weight of inside 50s. You're eventually going to make some mistakes. You get some fortunate free kicks. Just it's the weight of numbers type stuff. Cox was okay. He went in for a couple of marks and didn't clunk them. They got some goals out the back. But I think that's a similar weight of numbers thing. Luke Ryan was a bit unsighted, but he was unwell during the week. Not sure if the flu went through the group or something. I think that'd be a bit of an easy cop-out. And Hayden Young, I thought, had a good first quarter, but then sort of faded out of the game. And we really need, I think, Luke Ryan and Hayden Young and Chapman when he's back in the team. These guys getting their hands on the ball because they're the ones that set up the plays going forward. I thought Jordan Clark played a very strong game, actually. He competed a lot, ran some blokes down. So I think he can hold his head high as well. In the middle of the ground, Will Brodie, I can say, was a solid contributor and played well, but sort of outside that, the midfield group were horrid. Sarong, barely sided. Brayshaw, not much of it. Mundy, only 4 touches at half time, and one of those was a absolute turnover in the middle of the ground that went down for a goal, and then he did the same thing in the third or the fourth quarter as well. Fife got involved in some scuffles at 3/4 time, but couldn't really get his hands on it either. So Midfield I thought was well beaten. I thought Darcy was okay, but I think the younger ruckman De Koning really got him, particularly at the centre bounces where he got smashed out of centre bounce clearances. And that's all you can put it on is the midfield group. I think there was 16 centre bounces that Carlton won that got turned into inside 50s. So that's just poor midfield pressure. People are going to blame Fife for upsetting the apple cart and stuff, but I'll come back to that. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. Forward line, Tabs was okay for like a half or three quarters. When it went to him, he was winning contested marks. He kicked 2 goals, but he was really starved for opportunity. Lob didn't have his greatest game, but I think it's a bit of a similar story. Like, he just didn't get enough looks to build his confidence. And the sort of Mosquito fleet, they came out at 3/4 time and buzzed around for about 10-15 minutes, but then went back to sleep. The ball just rebounded out of Carlton's 50 so easily. Like, the ball would go in, mark is contested, spilled, Carlton player picks it up, handball, kick, they're out. Like, it just happened again and again and again. We just couldn't lock it in, couldn't build any defensive pressure on them. And yeah, so it was pretty sort of disappointing all the way around. Some of the backs can hold their heads up. Maybe Will Brodie and maybe Tabs for a half, but pretty much all round poor performance. Talking about Fife, so I've heard a lot of people just slagging off Fife, and I don't think I've heard of a star player in the comp get as much flack as Nat Fife does. You look at guys like Dustin Martin, Dangerfield, Buddy Franklin. Even recent Brownlow medal winners like Lockie Neal, Ollie Wines, Tom Mitchell, these blokes don't even cop as much flack as Nat Fife does. I don't even understand it. Because, yes, the team was playing well before he came in. He's now come in. We've won one game. We've lost one game. And they were both against fairly decent opponents. Hawthorn have given some teams higher up in the ladder some trouble. And Carlton are a good side as well. And I think the problem is just in the midfield rotations. And it's not like Fife's come in and he's deliberately upset it. I think it's more on the coaching group because they brought Fife in and they haven't dropped any other inside midfielders. So they just go the midfield rotations we had before with Sarong, Brodie, Mundy, and Brayshaw, right? And you'd have some other guys float through there like Aish and Switkowski and stuff, or Walters for a couple of bounces. But that's your primary group, right? Those guys. So they bring Fife in, right? But they don't drop any of those other guys, right? And it's pretty hard to drop those, like any of those groups, right? So I would say you would need to drop Mundy, right? And that's why people are saying, oh, you can't play Fife or Mundy. Now, if you're not going to drop Mundy, you then need to figure out your rotations. And so this is the bit where I don't think the coaching group's got it right. So you're either going to play Fife more at half forward, and they've been playing Fife fairly, like 50% forward. So in this game where he's got 11 touches, it's a bit hard to criticise Fife for not getting his hands on the ball when he's playing half the game up forward and our midfield is getting dominated and they can't get the ball forward. Like, how's that his fault? He's not playing in the middle. The other bit is the other rotations. So, like, can Brodie play any other position? So, if it's no, then that's okay. But, like, Brayshaw or Sarong, can they play a wing? Can they play half forward? And then Mundy, like, can he play half back? Like, there's just some of those rotation stuff I don't think they've necessarily nailed with Fife coming in. So, people, like, blame Fife. Like, it's his fault. He's come in and he's upset everything. Like, Freo, Fife loves Freo. Like, he'd be as disheartened with the performances at the moment as anyone. And, yeah, the number of people that just question Fife is just beggars belief. Anyway, enough about that game. I'm giving the boys a mulligan next week. It was after a bye. Sometimes teams just play poorly after a bye. And then next week we'll come out against Port Adelaide and play a lot better. I hope. So the next game was Geelong against Richmond. Cracker game. Geelong took the early lead, made it like a 25-30 point margin. Richmond came all the way back. We're up by two to three goals in the last quarter, and then Geelong came back again and kicked a couple to win by 3 points. It was an awesome game. I tipped Richmond in this one, so I was a bit gutted. I thought I was up and about when they took the lead, but it's been a bit of a pattern for Richmond. Like, they'll have a lead in that final quarter and they get run down a lot this year. In other games, it's been more they've had a big lead going into 3-quarter time. Between 18 and 25 points. That's sort of, it's a healthy margin. They only need to kick a couple of goals and it's probably game over. Teams seem to be able to wind it back against them. In this one, it was only like 7 minutes to go or something and Geelong came back. So it's something I think they just need to look at from a conditioning perspective. Maybe it's a few guys going out. Big one as well was Prestia, their best player, getting taken out by Tom Stewart, and Tom Stewart ends up being best on ground. The margin's 3 points. You kind of look at that with a raised eyebrow and go, But anyway, Geelong roll on. Sydney against St Kilda. Didn't watch much of this game, but it was the sort of expected pumping from Sydney. Saints looking really flat, a bit wobbly now. They were good against Brisbane until a lot of those injuries. They got beaten by the Bombers, and now it's looking wobbly, and they might fall out of the finals contention. North against Adelaide. Went for the upset with North. Big mistake. At half-time, it was close-ish. I thought, maybe they're a chance down in Hobart. They're not going to have too many chances to win many games, I think, for the rest of the year. But Adelaide just put the foot down, and credit to them, they absolutely thumped North. Then we had Collingwood against GWS, and Collingwood were leading most of the day. They left a lot of goals out there with their accuracy. GWS came back towards the end and just made the margin a bit closer. And maybe worried Collingwood a bit for maybe that last 10-15 minutes of the game, but Collingwood are in control for pretty much the whole day. And then the last game was an absolute cracker. Port Adelaide against Gold Coast. Port pretty much held the lead for most of the game, but Gold Coast sort of consistently hovered around that 1 to 3 goal margin, and like the 1 to 2 goal range really for most of that game. But they just couldn't get that couple to silence the crowd and get a couple of goals ahead. And Port Adelaide held on for a very close win. Keeps them in the hunt for finals, and they go equal on points with Gold Coast. So I ended up with 5 tips correct for the round, and maybe if I'd actually tip some favourites like Adelaide against North and Melbourne against Brisbane, I got 7, which would be quite a decent round. But let me know how you went. Leave me a like in the comment. Do you give the boys a mulligan for next week, or do you think there needs to be some serious changes at selection table? I'll be back later in the week for my tips for next round. Until then, catch you all later. Bye, everyone.